Today I will tell you true story from Washington. One of my friends told me I will share you as is it. Let's begin. Before that, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story of revenge. I want to know how far it's gone. I had barely stepped through the front doors of the Azure Crest banquet hall when the first words of the evening sliced straight into me like a cold blade. Who allowed that woman inside? She looks like she wandered in from the street. I froze mid-step, only 3 feet into the decorated lobby, my purse still half open, and already the whispers had begun. The speaker was Maribel Vaughn, one of the bridesmaids, dressed in a pale gold gown that shimmered beneath the chandeliers. She stared at me with a curled lip, as if I had dragged mud across the marble floors. Her friend beside her leaned in, loudly whispering, "Is she homeless?" Several heads turned. A few snickered, and then came the voice I dreaded most. "Security, remove her from the entrance. She's not to be in any photos." Ginevra Lawn, the groom's mother, approached with a hard expression that could slice glass. She had disliked me from the first moment my son, Aidan, introduced us. To her, I was a weed in the middle of her manicured garden, something that should have been trimmed out of his life long ago. The security guard stepped toward me. "Ma'am, the service staff entrance is around the back." I straightened my shoulders. "I'm not staff. I'm the groom's mother." He blinked and stared, clearly thinking I was lying. "Are you sure, ma'am?" A couple walking by snickered. Aidan Lawn wouldn't have a mother like that. The words echoed like old wounds, reopening wounds from supermarket lines, office hallways, and every job where people only saw me when they needed trash taken out. Wore the nicest thing I owned, a sky blue dress I ironed twice that morning, hoping the fabric would look newer than it was. My shoes were clean but worn at the edges. No amount of scrubbing could hide the years of U-stop before I could respond. The door to the bridal suite opened, and everyone fell silent. Aidan emerged in his tailored ivory seat, his hair perfectly styled. For a brief second, our eyes met. Something flickered their recognition, hesitation, guilt before it vanished. "She's not supposed to be here," he said quietly to Ginevra. "She wasn't invited." The sentence struck harder than all the whispers combined. My son, choosing them over me. Ginevra stepped closer, her voice dripping with superiority. "This is the woman you told us about, the one who raised you out of obligation?" Aidan looked away. And that's when the guard touched my elbow gently. "This way, ma'am." I did not argue. I did not resist. I simply walked because humiliation wasn't new. It was simply returning home. But what they didn't know was that this wasn't the first time my son tried to erase me. And it began long before this wedding. People imagine humiliation begins in grand moments, like standing in a crowded wedding hall while strangers whisper and point. But mine started long before that night. It began in the quiet hours. Years ago, when I pushed a cleaning cart down echoing corridors of the Riverbend corporate tower, the harsh scent of disinfectant clinging to my skin no matter how much I scrubbed. The smell became a part of me, an invisible label society recognized long before they knew my name. Worked late nights because the shift paid a little extra. But the real reason was simple. I wanted to be home in the morning when Aidan woke up. He was 7 when I first noticed the change. He would run to me at dawn, throwing his arms around my neck without caring about the bleach scent that lingered on my clothes. Back then, his love was pure, wide-eyed, full-hearted, unconditional. But childhood innocence has an expiration date. When he started elementary school, the world taught him how to feel ashamed of me. The first time it happened, I had brought his forgotten lunch to school. I remember the linoleum floors shining beneath the fluorescent lights, the low chatter of children waiting in line. and the unmistakable voice of a boy announcing far too loudly, "Ibu, your mom smells like bathrooms." His friends laughed. Aiden's face heated so fast I thought he might burn. When I reached out to touch his shoulder, he recoiled so sharply he nearly stumbled. "Just go," he whispered. I placed the lunchbox quietly on the bench and walked away, pretending not to hear the snickers behind me, pretending his words hadn't cracked something inside me. But cracks only grow. After my husband passed, the little support we had from his side evaporated instantly. They blamed me for everything: his death, our poverty, every misfortune that had ever shadowed our home. "She drags bad luck with her," I overheard his sister say once. "She's not someone a child should look up to." Aiden heard it too. I saw the way his shoulders tensed, the way he lowered his head as if trying to shrink himself between their judgments and my presence. Those words might fade for some children, but Aiden absorbed them like ink soaking into fabric deep, permanent, staining Dot by the time he entered middle school. His embarrassment had sharpened into resentment. I took a job on campus as a building custodian, thinking being closer to him would help. I was wrong. The kids took photos of me pushing my mop bucket one afternoon. By evening, the picture was circulating online with a caption that burned. "Is this Aiden Lawn's mom?" Yikes. The next morning, Aiden stormed up to me. "Why do you always have to show up? You ruin everything." And for the first time, I realized I was no longer someone he loved. I was someone he needed to hide. But I didn't know he would soon rewrite his entire life and bury me in the process. By the time Aiden entered high school, the distance between us had grown into something wide enough to echo. His shame was no longer subtle, no longer disguised by awkward smiles or quick excuses. It had become deliberate, calculated, sharpened into something that hurt without needing to be spoken. And yet, I kept trying. I didn't understand then that a child can love you fully, until the world teaches them who is worthy. One afternoon during a fire drill, I learned just how deeply the world had molded him. I had come to campus to drop off documents he needed for a scholarship application. Students were scattered across the football field, chatting in clusters while waiting for the all clear. I spotted him near the bleachers and called out, "Aiden." The moment he turned and saw me, wearing my work uniform, holding my cleaning ID badge, his face crumpled. Not with joy, with dread. A boy beside him laughed. "Why's the janitor calling your name?" Aiden's face drained of color. I don't know her," he snapped. His voice cracked, but not with guilt, with desperation. That night, he refused to come to dinner. When he finally did speak, his words were ice. "You're not really a parent. You're just someone who raised me. Not mom. Not even a guardian. Someone. A placeholder. A living inconvenience." I sat across the kitchen table from him, staring at the boy I once carried on my hip, a little child who used to giggle when I braided his hair too tightly, the same boy who once clung to me during thunderstorms. But now, he looked at me like I was a mistake. Over the next year, I silently stitched together the pieces of his future. I asked counselors questions I could barely pronounce. I learned to fill out financial aid forms by watching late-night tutorials, because no one in my world had ever gone to college. When the time came to complete his university aid application, my hands shook as I typed our income. So low, it looked like a typo. Still, I signed it, because his dreams were worth every humiliation I had swallowed. But the version of the story he told, his friends, was different. I did everything myself. Didn't have anyone to support me. Those words found their way onto a social media post beneath a picture of his acceptance letter. Strangers praised him. Self-made. Inspiring. Struggled alone and still succeeded. I said nothing. Silence was the only language I had left Dot as he drifted further into a world that polished him into someone he believed he needed to be. He began quietly editing me out of the story. The saddest part wasn't that he removed me. It was how easily he did it. But the real betrayal, the one that proved I no longer existed in his life, came the night I visited his apartment. And another woman opened the door. I tried to stay in Aiden's life in the only way I knew how, quietly, gently, never demanding space he didn't want to offer. I never asked him for time or attention. I simply hoped that if I held on to the edges, he might one day look back and remember where he came from. One winter evening, I decided to visit him. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy. Just a small kindness, a gesture from a mother he pretended not to have. I had knitted him a charcoal grey sweater, the kind he used to love when he was younger. I remembered him saying once in passing that the city winters near his university apartment were colder than he expected. So I stopped by his favourite bakery, bought a box of the lemon pastries he adored as a child, and took the long bus ride across town. My heart was nervous, hopeful, foolish. I climbed the stairs to his apartment and knocked softly, clutching the box of pastries to keep my hands from trembling. But when the door opened, it wasn't Aiden. It was Ginevra Lorne. The woman who had looked at me like dirt at the wedding. The woman who had spent years shaping Aiden into someone who believed my presence was an inconvenience. She stared at me as if she had discovered mold growing on her doormat. "We don't accept unannounced visitors," she said sharply, blocking the doorway with her body. "This isn't appropriate." I blinked, confused. I'm just here to see Aiden. I won't stay long." She didn't budge. Behind her, I heard footsteps. Aiden's pause, and then slowly walk away without saying a single word. He didn't ask who was at the door. He didn't ask if everything was all right. He didn't call out to me. He simply retreated deeper into the apartment, letting her speak for him like he was a child again. But this time, a child who preferred her voice over mine. Ginevra stepped back and began closing the door. "You should leave." The latch clicked before I could say goodbye. I stood there in the hallway, the old fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above me, the cold biting through my coat. The pastries grew heavier in my hands until they felt like stones. My breath fogged in the frozen air as I whispered to no one. I raised him. How did I become a stranger? The sweater slipped from my arm and brushed the floor. I picked it up slowly and turned to leave, my steps echoing across the empty hallway. That night, as I walked home alone, I understood something painful and irreversible. I had opened every door for my son, but he had learned to close every one of them in my face. And I had no idea that the greatest door he would close was the one where he erased me from existence entirely. The staff room at the Azure Crest Banquet Hall was colder than the main hall outside, though the kitchen's deep fryers sent waves of heat rolling through the thin walls. I sat on a folding chair near a stack of catering trays, my purse clutched tightly in my lap. Through the vent, I could faintly hear the wedding music, violins, laughter, glasses clinking. Sounds of celebration I was not meant to be part of. Being invisible in public wasn't new, but being invisible at my own son's wedding carved a deeper kind of wound. The door swung open sharply. Ginevra walked in first, pristine in her pearl-white blazer. She turned her gaze on me the way someone looks at a stain on a silk dress. "This room is for employees," she said. "Not people like you." Her words floated in the cold air, chilling me further. Aiden followed her inside. The moment I saw him, instinct forced me to my feet. He looked painfully handsome, hair styled perfectly, tuxedo flawless, a boutonniere pinned neatly to his lapel. For a brief moment, for the tiniest fraction of it, second, I saw the little boy who used to run to me after school. "You look wonderful," I whispered, my voice cracking. He flinched, as if my affection were a burden. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "This day isn't about distractions." Distractions. That was what I had become. Before I could speak, Ginevra cut in sharply. "We need her removed permanently. This is embarrassing for our family." Aidan didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He just lowered his gaze and whispered something that shattered the air around me. "I wish she wouldn't show up in my life. At all." He didn't know I heard. But I did. The staff member who'd been lingering by the door shifted uncomfortably. Before he could escort me out again, a soft voice spoke behind him. "Ma'am? Would you like some water?" A young caterer, Ivy Marin. Her name tag read offered me a small cup. Her eyes held something no one else in that building had shown me. Humanity. I took the cup slowly. "Thank you," I whispered. She sat beside me without hesitation. "Are you part of the family?" I looked down at the cup in my shaking hands before answering. "I'm the groom's mother." Shock flashed across her face. "But they said you—" "I know what they said," I replied, my voice barely holding together. Her eyes filled with anger, not at me, but for me. "Do you need help?" she asked softly. For the first time that night, I did. "Yes," I said firmly. "Please call your manager." Within minutes, a tall man, Landon Pierce, the venue director, entered with stiff posture and a formal tone. When I handed him my original booking documents, his expression shifted from annoyance to alarm. "Miss Rowan," he said slowly, scanning the papers. "This is very serious." He cleared his throat, then looked up. "According to the documents submitted by the Lawn family, the groom's mother is listed as deceased." The word struck me like a physical blow. Deceased. Dead. Erased. Aidan hadn't just distanced himself from me, he had buried me on paper. And that fraudulent lie, it gave me a power they never expected, a power that would bring their entire wedding to a halt. Landon Pierce, the venue director, stood frozen with my documents in hand, his jaw tightening as he reread the forged paperwork the Lawn family had submitted. He finally looked at me, his voice low and serious. "Miss Rowan, this is contract fraud of the highest level. Declaring a living person deceased for a discount is illegal." I felt strangely calm. Pain has a way of hollowing you out until nothing can surprise you anymore. "What are my options?" I asked quietly. Landon straightened, recognizing the authority he had overlooked moments earlier. "As the original depositor and an early shareholder," he explained, "you hold the power to cancel any event involving fraudulent behavior or reputational risk." He paused, letting the words settle. "In this case, you can terminate the wedding immediately." The air grew still. Through the vent above us, Aidan's voice echoed, amplified by the microphone. "My parents passed away when I was young, but today I'm surrounded by love." The lie drifted through the metal grates and sank into my chest like cold iron. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I simply exhaled. "Cancel the event," I said. Landon nodded once, with a respect he had not shown me earlier. "As you wish, Ms. Rowan." A moment later, the lights in the hall flickered violently and then went completely dark. Guests gasped, voices rising in confusion. "What's happening? Is this part of the ceremony?" "Someone fixed the electricity. Emergency." Lights flickered on in thin red strips near the exits, casting the entire room in an eerie glow like everyone was standing underwater. Then a voice boomed across the hall. "What is the meaning of this?" Thatcher's father, Mr. Lawn, barked orders at the staff, his outrage echoing through the room. Ginevra's heels clicked furiously on the floor as she hissed, "Get this fixed now." But their commands meant nothing anymore. Landon stepped into the center of the room, a single flashlight illuminating his face. He raised a folder in his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "this event is officially terminated at the request of the primary client." The hall went silent. Thatcher's father thundered, "Primary client? That's us." Landon slowly turned his flashlight toward me. "No," he said. "It's her." All eyes shifted to the far end of the room, where I stepped forward, emerging from the dim emergency light. Whispers rippled like a tidal wave around me. "That's the woman they said was homeless. She's the groom's mother? Why is she the client? What is going on?" I kept walking, one step, then another, each step steadier than the last. When I reached the center of the hall, I lifted my chin. "My name is Mara Rowan," I said clearly, "and I am Aidan Lorne's mother." Gasps spread across the room like sparks in dry grass. "I paid for this venue," I continued, "yet according to your paperwork, I've been dead for years." The madness erupting around me didn't matter. All I saw was Aidan's face drained of color, eyes wide, mouth trembling. Guilt had finally found him. But it wasn't guilt that broke him. It was what I said next, words that shattered whatever image he had built without me. The hall was so silent I could hear my own pulse. Aidan stood a few feet away, frozen in place, surrounded by people who had spent years shaping him into someone I barely recognized. I held the fraudulent document high enough for every guest to see. "This," I said steadily, "is the form your family submitted. It lists me as deceased." A wave of horrified murmurs rippled through the room. "Who would do that?" "Oh my God, that's sick. They said she died years ago." Ginevra's face went paper white. Thatcher tried to whisper something to her, but she shook her head violently. Aidan stared at the paper like it was a ghost. I turned toward him, not as a woman he once knew, not as the mother he left behind, but as the truth he could no longer outrun. "You erased me," I said softly. He flinched. "You erased me from your forms to save money. You erased me from your life to save pride. You erased me tonight to impress people who will never love you the way I did." A strangled sound escaped his throat. I stepped closer, but not to comfort him, only to make sure he heard every word. "I filled out your scholarship paperwork when you were 17. I worked overtime so you could have your deposit here. I bought shares in this company so you could have options I never had." Tears gathered in his eyes, trembling at the edges. "But you told the world you did everything alone," I continued. "You pretended I never existed. And now, your lies are finally louder than your silence." He opened his mouth, voice cracking. I only wanted to look successful, to look better. By burying me." I asked. He had no answer. The guests watched in stunned silence. The truth unraveling the story he told them for years. His friends, his colleagues, even his fiancée, everyone stood there, witnessing the collapse of the image he worked so hard to build. Then came the moment I had carried quietly for years. "You once said," I spoke slowly, "that you wished I wouldn't show up in your life at all." Aidan's knees nearly buckled. He covered his face with shaking hands. I didn't mean, but it was too late." I stepped back, my voice steady and unbroken. "Tonight, Aidan Lorne, I give you exactly what you wished for." A sob escaped him, raw, desperate, real. I turned away, the room watching as the man who once denied me now crumbled under the weight of his own choices. I walked toward the exit, heels tapping softly against the marble floor. Not one person dared to stop me. Behind me, I heard his voice break. "Mom, please, don't go. I'm sorry, please." But I didn't look back. For once in my life, I chose myself. But the world didn't stay quiet. When morning came, the truth went viral. And everything changed. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, my phone buzzed non-stop on the kitchen table. At first, I ignored it. I assumed it was a wrong number or a telemarketer. But the buzzing didn't stop. When I finally picked up the phone, dozens of messages flashed on the screen: links, screenshots, headlines. I clicked on one, and a video opened. My video. The moment I confronted Aiden. The forged paperwork. The hall going silent. My voice saying, "Tonight, I give you exactly what you wished for." Someone had recorded everything, and it had gone viral overnight. Titles flooded my screen. Groom fakes mother's death for discount, wedding ends in chaos. Mother shuts down ceremony after being declared dead. The invisible mom who refused to stay. Buried. Thousands of comments poured in: mothers, workers, people who had lived in silence their whole lives. They wrote, "I know that pain. She reminds me of my mom. I hope she finds peace. She deserved better." For the first time in years, strangers saw me. Not as a burden, not as an embarrassment, but as a human being. Meanwhile, the Lawn family suffered fallout almost immediately. Their investment group lost clients by the hour. Partnerships dissolved. A financial blog labeled them a dynasty built on entitlement and polished lies. As for Aiden's fiancée, she issued a statement distancing herself from the family within days. Aiden's job placed him on leave due to ethical concerns, a phrase that likely stung him more than anything I ever said. And people recognized Ginevra everywhere she went. Her perfectly curated world cracked like thin glass. But the hardest impact fell on Aiden. He showed up at my house 2 days later, standing on my porch with trembling hands, face hollowed by sleepless nights. I didn't open the door. Instead, I watched from the window as he cried silently, shoulders shaking. I didn't unlock the door. Not out of revenge, but because healing doesn't happen when the wound is still bleeding. I let him walk away. A week later, I visited a small law office and finalized my will. My savings, my home, and the modest shares I owned would go into a fund for women who cleaned for a living, women like me who were always unseen. Aiden would receive nothing. But I didn't leave him with hatred. I left him a letter sealed, unmailed, waiting for a day when he might be ready. In it I wrote, "You were the greatest joy of my life. But I cannot be a mother only when it suits you. If one day you return not for image, not for forgiveness, but for truth, my door will open. But only if you knock with honesty." That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky turn gold. For the first time in my life, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. And I finally stepped out of the story he built and into the one I deserved. If you like my story, please like this video. Subscribe channel and comment below what kind of story you like this. I will find for you real stories.